just wanted
I
to...
want to bring in Congressman Ryan to respond to what Senator Sanders just said.
Senator Sanders does not know all of the union contracts in the United States. I'm trying to explain that these union members are losing their jobs. Their wages have been stagnant. The world is crumbling around them. The only thing they have is possibly really good health care. And the Democratic message is going to be, we're going to go in, and the only thing you have left, we're going to take it, and we're going to do better. I do not think that's a recipe for success for us. It's bad policy, and it's certainly bad politics.
Congressman Delaney?
So the bill that Senator Sanders drafted, by definition, will lower quality in health care because it says specifically that the rates will be the same as current Medicare rates. And the data is clear. Medicare does not cover the cost of health care. It covers 80% of the cost of health care in this country. And private insurance covers 120%. So if you start underpaying all the health care providers, you're going to create a two-tier market where wealthy people buy their health care with cash, and the people who are forced, like my dad, the union electrician, will have that health care plan taken away from him.
Thank you, Congressman.
They will be forced into an underfunded system.
I want to give Senator Sanders a chance to respond.
Under Medicare for All, the hospitals will save substantial sums of money because they're not going to be spending a fortune doing billing and the other bureaucratic things that they have to do today. Second of all, maybe you did that and made money off of health care, but our job is to run a nonprofit health care system. Furthermore, when we save $500 billion a year by ending all of the incredible complexities that are driving every American crazy trying to deal with the health insurance company,
Thank you,
hospitals
Senator.
will be better
Congressman
off
Delaney,
than
I
they are
want to let
today.
you have a chance to respond.
Listen, his math is wrong. That's all I'm saying. That his math is wrong. It's been well documented that if all the bills were paid at Medicare rate, which is specifically, I think it's in Section 1200 of their bill, then many hospitals in this country would close. I've been going around rural America, and I ask rural hospital administrators one question. If all your bills were paid at the Medicare rate last year, what would happen? And they all look at me and say, we would close. But the question is, why do we have to be so extreme? Why can't we just give everyone health care as a right and allow them to have choice? I'm starting to think this is not about health care. This is an anti-private sector strategy.
We're going to move on to the issue of immigration now. There is widespread agreement on this stage on the need for immigration reform, a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, including Dreamers. But there are some areas of disagreement. Mayor Buttigieg, you're in favor of getting rid of the law that makes it a crime to come across the U.S. border illegally. Why won't that just encourage more illegal immigration?
When I'm president, illegally crossing the border will still be illegal. We can argue over the finer points of which parts of this ought to be handled by civil law and which parts ought to be handled by criminal law. But we've got a crisis on our hands. And it's not just a crisis of immigration, it's a crisis of cruelty and incompetence that has created a humanitarian disaster on our southern border. It is a stain on the United States of America. Americans want comprehensive immigration reform. And frankly, we've been talking about the same framework for my entire adult lifetime. Protections for Dreamers, making sure that we have a pathway to citizenship for the undocumented, cleaning up lawful immigration. We know what to do. We know that border security can be part of that package, and we can still be a nation of laws. The problem is we haven't had the will to get it done in Washington. And now we have a president who could fix it in a month because there is that bipartisan agreement. But he needs it to be a crisis rather than an achievement. That will end on my watch.
Just a point of clarification. You did raise your hand in the last debate. You do want to decriminalize crossing the border illegally.
So in my view, if fraud is involved, then that's suitable for the criminal statute. If not, then it should be handled under civil law. But these show of hands are exactly what is wrong with the way that this race is being covered.
We're not doing that here.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. Congressman O'Rourke, you live near the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso. You disagree with Mayor Buttigieg on decriminalizing legal border crossings. Please respond.
I do, because in my administration, after we have waived citizenship fees for green card holders, more than 9 million of our fellow Americans, freed Dreamers from any fear of deportation, and stopped criminally prosecuting families and children for seeking asylum and refuge, end for-profit detention in this country, and then assist those countries in Central America so that no family ever has to make that 2,000-mile journey, then I expect that people who come here follow our laws, and we reserve the right to criminally prosecute them if they do not.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Warren, you say the provision making illegal border crossings a crime is totally unnecessary. Please respond.
So the problem is that right now, the criminalization statute is what gives Donald Trump the ability to take children away from their parents. It's what gives him the ability to lock up people at our borders. We need to continue to have border security, and we can do that. But what we can't do is not live our values. I've been down to the border. I have seen the mothers. I have seen the cages of babies. We must be a country that every day lives our values, and that means we cannot make it a crime when someone comes here.
Thank you, Senator. Just to clarify, would you decriminalize illegal border crossings?
The point is not about criminalization. That has given Donald Trump the tool to break families apart.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Hickenlooper, your response.
No, I agree that we need secure borders. There's no question about that. And the frustration with what's going on in Washington is they're kicking the ball back and forth. Secure the borders. Make sure whatever law we have doesn't allow children to be snatched from their parents and put in cages. How hard can that be? We've got, I don't know, on the 2 debate nights, we've got 170 years of Washington experience. Somehow it seems like that should be fairly fixable.
Well, and one way to fix it is to decriminalize. That's the whole point. What we're looking for here is a way to take away the tool that Donald Trump has used to break up families.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Klobuchar, your response.
I would say there is the will to change this in Congress. What's missing is the right person in the White House. I believe that immigrants don't diminish America. They are America. And if you want to do something about border security, you first of all change the rules so people can seek asylum in those northern triangle countries. Then you pass the bill, and what the bill will do is it'll greatly reduce the deficit and give us some money for border security and for border help processing the cases. And most of all, it will allow for a path to citizenship, because this is not just about the border. Donald Trump wants to use these people as political pawns.
Thank you, Senator
When we have people all over our country that simply want to work and obey the law.
Senator Sanders, you want to provide undocumented immigrants free health care and free college. Why won't this drive even more people to come to the U.S. illegally?
This will have a strong border protections. But the main point I want to make is that what Trump is doing through his racism and his xenophobia is demonizing a group of people. And as president, I will end that demonization. If a mother and a child walk thousands of miles on a dangerous path, in my view, they are not criminals. They are people fleeing violence. And I think the main thing that we've got to do, among many others, and Beto made this point, we've got to ask ourselves, why are people walking 2,000 miles to a strange country where they don't know the language? So what we will do the first week we are in the White House is bring the entire hemisphere together to talk about how we rebuild Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador so people do not have to flee their own countries.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Bullock. About 2/3 of Democratic voters and many of your rivals here for the nomination support giving health insurance to undocumented immigrants. You haven't gone that far. Why not?
Look, I think this is a part of the discussion that shows how often these debates are detached from people's lives. We got 100,000 people showing up at the border right now. If we decriminalize entry, if we get health care to everyone, we'll have multiples of that. Don't take my word. That was President Obama's Homeland Security Secretary that said that. The biggest problem right now that we have with immigration, it's Donald Trump. He's using immigration to not only rip apart families, but rip apart this country. We can actually get to the point where we have both safe borders, where we have a path to citizenship, where we have opportunities for dreamers. And you don't have to decriminalize everything. What you have to do is have a president in there with the judgment and the decency to treat someone that comes to the border like one of our own.
You know, I just
Senator,
like to add on this.
He just said your plan is unrealistic. How do you respond?
You know, I think that what we have to do is we have to be an America that is clear about what we want to do with immigration. We need to expand legal immigration. We need to create a path for citizenship, not just for dreamers, but for grandmas and for people who have been working here in the farms and for students who have overstayed their visas. We need to fix the crisis at the border. And a big part of how we do that is we do not play into Donald Trump's hands. But he wants to stir up the crisis at the border because that's his overall message. If there's anything wrong in your life,
thank you,
blame
Senator Warren.
them.
Governor Bullock, your response.
But you are playing into Donald Trump's hands. The challenge isn't that it's a criminal offense to cross the border. The challenge is that Donald Trump is president and using this to rip families apart. A sane immigration system needs a sane leader. And we can do that without decriminalizing, providing health care for everyone. And it's not me saying that. That's Obama's Homeland Security Secretary that said you'll cause further problems at the border, not making it better.
Look, what you're saying is ignore the law. Laws matter. And it matters if we say our law is that we will lock people up who come here seeking refuge, who come here seeking asylum. That is not a crime. And as Americans, what we need to do is have a sane system that keeps us safe at the border, but does not criminalize the activity of a mother fleeing here.
Thank you.
safety.
Congressman Ryan, are Senator Sanders' proposals going to incentivize undocumented immigrants to come into this country illegally?
Yes. And right now, if you want to come into the country, you should at least ring the doorbell. We have asylum laws. I saw the kids up in Grand Rapids, not far from here. It is shameful what's happening. But Donald Trump is doing it. And even if you decriminalize, which we should not do, you still have statutory authority. The president could still use his authority to separate families. So we've got to get rid of Donald Trump. But you don't decriminalize people just walking into the United States. If they're seeking asylum, of course we want to welcome them. We're a strong enough country to be able to welcome them. And as far as the health care goes, undocumented people can buy health care too. I mean, everyone else in America is paying for their health care. I don't think it's a stretch for us to ask undocumented people in the country to also pay for health care.
Senator Sanders, your response.
Well, two things. A sane immigration policy moves to comprehensive immigration reform. It moves to a humane border policy in which, by the way, we have enough administrative judges so that we don't have incredible backlogs that we have right now. But to answer your question, I happen to believe that when I talk about health care as a human right, that applies to all people in this country. And under a Medicare for all single-payer system, we could afford to do that.
Senator Sanders, thank you. Ms. Williamson, your response.
Everything that we're talking about here tonight is what's wrong with American politics. And the Democratic Party needs to understand that we should be the party that talks not just about symptoms, but also about causes. When we're talking about health care, we need to talk about more than just the health care plan. We need to realize we have a sickness care rather than a health care system. We need to be the party talking about why so many of our chemical policies and our food policies and our agricultural policies and our environmental policies and even our economic policies are leading to people getting sick to begin with.
Thank you.
That's what the Democratic, but I want to say more about...
Thank you, Ms. Williamson.
Okay, I hope you'll come back to me this time.
Go ahead. Thank you, Ms. Williamson. Let's turn now to the issue of gun violence. There were 3 large-scale shootings this past weekend in America, at a park in Brooklyn, on the streets of Philadelphia, and one that left 3 dead and 12 injured at a food festival in Gilroy, California. Mayor Buttigieg, other than offering words of comfort, what are you specifically going to do to stop this epidemic of gun violence?
Well, this epidemic of gun violence has hit my community too, far too many times. It's the worst part of being mayor, getting the phone call, consoling grieving parents. And we have a mass shootings worth of killings every day in this country. What we're doing hasn't worked because we haven't had a system in Washington capable of delivering what the American people have told us they want. 80–90% of Republicans want universal background checks, not to mention the common sense solutions like red flag laws that disarm domestic abusers and flag mental health risks, and an end to assault weapons, things like what I carried overseas in uniform that have no business in American neighborhoods in peacetime, let alone anywhere near a school. I was at an event a few days ago, and a 13-year-old asked me, what we were going to do about school safety, and then began shaking, and then began crying. And we could talk about these policies, but we already know the policies. The only thing I could think of looking into the eyes of this child is, we're supposed to be dealing with this so you don't have to. High school is hard enough without having to worry about whether you're going to get shot. And when 90% of Americans want something to happen, and
Mayor.
Washington can't deliver, we can't expect the same.
Thank you, Mayor. Governor Hickenlooper, your response, please.
I disagree with his
Please stand by,
diagnosis of
Senator.
the problem
Please stick
here.
to the rules. We'll
Okay.
get to you. We'll come to you in just a minute. Governor Hickenlooper, please respond.
Well, this is the fundamental nonsense of government. Another thing, another place where, despite our best efforts, we can't seem to make any progress. You know, when I went to the movie theater in Aurora in 2012 and saw that footage of what happened at that crime scene, I'll never forget it. And we decided, you know, that we were going to go out and take on the NRA. And we passed, as a purple state, we passed universal background checks. We limited magazine capacity. We did the basic work that, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be able to get done in Washington.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Klobuchar, please respond.
This isn't just about a system, or it's not just about words. This is about the NRA. I sat across from the President of the United States after Parkland because I've been a leader on these issues and have the bill to close the boyfriend loophole. And I watched and wrote down when 9 times he said he wanted universal background checks. The next day he goes and he meets with the NRA and he folds. As your president, I will not fold. I will make sure that we get universal background checks passed, the assault weapon ban, that we do something about magazines, and that we understand when that little 6-year-old boy died, Stephen Romero, when his dad said he's only 6 years old, all I can say is he's 6 years
Mayor
old.
Buttigieg, please
We have to
respond.
remember that.
This is the exact same conversation we've been having since I was in high school. I was a junior when the Columbine shooting happened. I was part of the first generation that saw routine school shootings. We have now produced the second school shooting generation in this country. We dare not allow there to be a third. Something is broken, if it is even possible, for the same debate around the same solutions that we all know are the right thing to do. They won't prevent every incident, they won't save every life, but we know what to do, and it has not happened.
Thank you, Mayor. Senator Klobuchar, please respond.
Yes. What is broken is a political system that allows the NRA and other large, big money to come in and make things not happen when the majority of people are for it. The people are with us now. After Parkland, those students just didn't march. They talked to their dads and their grandpas and the hunters in their family, and they said there must be a better way. Then we elected people in the House of Representatives, and guess what? It changed, and they passed universal background checks. And now that bill is sitting on Mitch McConnell's doorstep because of the money and the power of the NRA. As president, I will take them on.
Thank you, Senator.
This is not about systems and words.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Governor Bullock, how can Democrats trust you to be the leader on this fight for gun safety when you only changed your position to call for an assault weapons ban last summer?
They're like 40% of American households. I'm a gun owner. I hunt. Like far too many people in America, I've been personally impacted by gun violence. Had an 11-year-old nephew, Jeremy, shot and killed on a playground. We need to start looking at this as a public health issue, not a political issue. I agree with Senator Klobuchar. It is the NRA. And it's not just gun violence. It's when we talk about climate, when we talk about prescription drug costs. Washington, D.C. is captured by dark money, the Koch brothers and others. That's been the fight of my career, kicking the Koch brothers out of Montana, taking the first case after Citizens United up to the Supreme Court, making it so that elections are about people. That's the way we're actually going to make a change on this, Don, is by changing that system and most of the things that folks are talking about on this stage. We're not going to address until we kick dark money and the post-Citizens United corporate spending out of these elections.
Congressman O'Rourke, what your response?
How else can we explain that we lose nearly 40,000 people in this country to gun violence, a number that no other country comes even close to, that we know what all the solutions are and yet nothing has changed? It is because in this country, money buys influence, access, and increasingly outcomes. The Centers for Disease Control prevented from actually studying the issue in the first place As president, we will make sure that we ban political action committee contributions to any member of Congress or any candidate for federal office. We will listen to people, not PACs, people, not corporations, people, not special interests.
Congressman, thank you very much. Senator Sanders, you said this in 2013, just months after the Sandy Hook massacre, and I quote here, "If you pass the strongest gun control legislation tomorrow, I don't think it will have a profound effect on the tragedies we have seen." Do you still agree with that statement today?
I think we have got to do, I think what I meant is what President Obama said, and that nobody up here is going to tell you that we have a magical solution to the crisis. Now, I come from one of the most rural states in America. I have a D- voting record from the NRA, and as president, I suspect it will be an F record. What I believe we have got to do is have the guts to finally take on the NRA. You asked me about my record. Back in 1988, coming from a state that had no gun control, I called for the ban of the sale and distribution of assault weapons. I lost that election. I will do everything I can not only to take on the NRA, but to expand and create universal background checks, do away with the straw man provision, do away with the gun show loophole, and do away with the loopholes that now exist for gun manufacturers who are selling large amounts of weapons into communities that are going to gangs.
Yeah. Mayor Buttigieg, your response?
Still the conversation that we've been having for the last 20 years. Of course we need to get money out of politics. But when I propose the actual structural democratic reforms that might make a difference, end the Electoral College, amend the Constitution if necessary to clear up Citizens United, have D.C. actually be a state, and depoliticize the Supreme Court with structural reform, people look at me funny, as if this country were incapable of structural reform. Does anybody really think we're going to overtake Citizens United without constitutional action? This is a country that once changed its constitution so you couldn't drink, and then changed it back because we changed our minds about that. And you're telling me we can't reform our democracy in our time?
Thank you, Mayor.
We have to, or we'll be having
Governor
the same
Bullock,
argument 20 years from now.
Please respond, Governor Bullock.
You can make changes. Even in Montana, with a 2/3 Republican legislature, we passed a law that said, if you're going to spend money in our elections, I don't care if you call yourself Americans for America, you're going to have to disclose every one of those dollars in the last 90 days. I'll never forget run for re-election in 2016. Even we stopped the Koch brothers from spending at that time. If we can kick the Koch brothers out of Montana, we can do it in D.C., we can do it everywhere. And we're also taking steps, additional steps that we've taken. I passed an executive order. If you're even going to contract with the state,
Governor Bullock, thank you very much. Ms. Williamson, how do you respond to this issue of gun safety?
The issue of gun safety, of course, is that the NRA has us in a chokehold. But so do the pharmaceutical companies, so do the health insurance companies, so do the fossil fuel companies, and so do the defense contractors. And none of this will change until we either pass a constitutional amendment or pass legislation that establishes public funding for federal campaigns. But for politicians, including my fellow candidates, who themselves have taken tens of thousands and in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars from these same corporate donors, to think that they now have the moral authority to say, we're going to take them on, I don't think the Democratic Party should be surprised that so many Americans believe yada, yada, yada. It is time for us to start over with people who have not taken donations from any of these corporations and can say with real moral authority, that is over. We are going to establish public funding for federal campaigns. That's what we need to stand up to. We need to have a constitutional amendment. We need to have legislation to do it. Until we do it, it's just the same old, same old.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson.
In poll after poll, Democratic voters say that they want a candidate who can beat President Trump more than they want a candidate who agrees with them on major issues. Governor Hickenlooper, you ran a Facebook ad that warned, quote, socialism is not the answer. The ad also said, quote, don't let extremes give Trump 4 more years. Are you saying that Senator Sanders is too extreme to beat President Trump?
I'm saying the policies of this notion that you're going to take private insurance away from 180 million Americans, who many of them don't want to give it. Many of them do want to get rid of it, but some don't. Many don't. Or you're going to the Green New Deal, make sure that every American is guaranteed a government job if they want. That is a disaster at the ballot box. You might as well FedEx the election to Donald Trump. I think we've got to focus on where Donald Trump is failing. You know, the word malpractice, and this is interesting. I always thought it was doctors or lawyers. It's, you know, negligent, improper, illegal professional activity for doctors, lawyers, or public officials. Google it. Check it out. Donald Trump is malpractice personified. We've got to point that out. Why is it soybean farmers in Iowa need 10 good years to get back to where they were 2 years ago? Where's the small manufacturing jobs that are supposed to come back? Why are we lurching from one international crisis to another? All things that he promised American voters. We've got to focus on that and the economy and jobs and training so that we can promise a future for America that everybody wants to invest in.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Sanders, you are a proud Democratic socialist. How do you respond to Governor Hickenlooper?
Well, the truth is that every credible poll that I have seen has me beating Donald Trump, including the battleground states of Michigan, where I won the Democratic primary, Wisconsin, where I won the Democratic primary, and Pennsylvania. And the reason we are going to defeat Trump and beat him badly is that he is a fraud and a phony, and we're going to expose him for what he is. The American people want to have a minimum wage, which is a living wage, $15 an hour. I've helped lead that effort. The American people want to pay reasonable prices for prescription drugs, not the highest prices in the world. I've helped lead the effort for that as well.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Hickenlooper, I want to bring you back to respond.
So, again, I think if we're going to force Americans to make these radical changes, they're not going to go along. You throw your hands up, but you haven't. Oh, I can do it. But you haven't implemented the plans. Us governors and mayors are the ones that we have to pick up all the pieces when suddenly the government's supposed to take over all these responsibilities and there's no preparation, the details aren't worked. You can't just spring a plan on the world and expect it to succeed.
Senator Sanders.
John, I was a mayor and I helped transform my city. I have some practical experience. Second of all, interestingly enough, today is the anniversary of Medicare. 54 years ago, under Lyndon Johnson and the Democratic Congress, they started a new program. After 1 year, 19 million elderly people in it. Please don't tell me that in a 4-year period, we cannot go from 65 down to 55 to 45 to 35. This is not radical. This is what virtually every other country on earth does. We are
Thank you, Senator. I want to bring in Congressman Ryan. You're from the state of Ohio. It's a state that voted twice for Obama and then went to President Trump in 2016. Please respond to Senator Sanders.
I would just say Hillary Clinton was winning in the polls, too. To take a snapshot in the polls today and apply it 16 months from now, whenever it is, I don't think is accurate. Now, in this discussion already tonight, we've talked about taking private health insurance away from union members in the industrial Midwest. We've talked about decriminalizing the border, and we've talked about giving free health care to undocumented workers when so many Americans are struggling to pay for their health care. I, quite frankly, don't think that that is an agenda that we can move forward on and win. We've got to talk about the working class issues, the people that take a shower after work who haven't had a raise in 30 years. If we focus on them, we'll win the election.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to bring Congressman O'Rourke. Your response, sir?
Bernie was talking about some of the battleground states in which we compete. There's a new battleground state, Texas, and it has 38 electoral college votes. And the way that we put it in play was by going to each one of those 254 counties. No matter how red or rural, we did not write you off. No matter how blue or urban, we did not take you for granted, and we didn't trim our sails either. We had the courage of our convictions, talking about universal health care, comprehensive immigration reform, and confronting the challenge of climate before it is too late. We brought everyone in, and now we have a chance to beat Donald Trump with Texas.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to bring Governor Bullock. We're talking about whether Democrats are moving too far to the left to win the White House. President Trump won your home state of Montana by 20 points. How do you respond, sir?
Yeah, as the only one of the field of 37 that actually won a Trump state, 25 to 30% of my voters voted for Donald Trump. I know that we do have to win back some of those places we lost and get those Trump voters back if we're ever going to win. But this isn't just a choice between the left and the center. It's not a choice just between sort of these wish list economics or thinking that we have to sacrifice our values to actually win. What folks want is a fair shot. The way I won, the way we can win is actually focusing on the economy, and democracy aren't working for most people.
Thank you,
That's
Governor.
how I win. That's how we can take back the office.
Senator Warren, you make it a point to say that you're a capitalist. Is that your way of convincing voters that you might be a safer choice than Senator Sanders?
No, it is my way of talking about I know how to fight and I know how to win. I took on giant banks and I beat them. I took on Wall Street and CEOs and their lobbyists and their lawyers, and I beat them. I took on a popular Republican incumbent senator, and I beat him. I remember when people said Barack Obama couldn't get elected. Shoot, I remember when people said Donald Trump couldn't get elected. But here's where we are. I get it. There is a lot at stake and people are scared. But we can't choose a candidate we don't believe in just because we're too scared to do anything else. And we can't ask other people to vote for a candidate we don't believe in. Democrats win when we figure out what is right and we get out there and fight for it. I am not afraid. And for Democrats to win, you can't be afraid either.